It started with a blink. Not a metaphor. Just a blink. 1 second my eyes were dry from the heat, and in the next, she wasn't where she'd been standing. We were in the middle of that absurdly crowded event downtown, music, booths, noise, and I was holding 2 drinks, turning to hand her one, and she was just gone. I turned left, right, spun a little like a confused idiot. She'd just been beside me. We'd been watching that guy juggling knives. His whole act was mid-collapse, and she laughed. I remember that part because it was the first time in weeks I'd heard her laugh without the delay that had started creeping into her expressions, like she had to calculate the right reaction. But then gone. Like a glitch in reality. She didn't say she was stepping away. No mention of the bathroom. I checked my phone. Nothing. My brain didn't panic. Not yet. I walked a slow circle. Scanned faces. Told myself she probably saw someone she knew. She grew up in this town, after all, maybe an old friend, maybe her sister. But 5 minutes passed. Then 7. Then 12. And there it was, that sensation, not quite fear, not quite suspicion, but something sickly and electric climbing up my spine and making my scalp tighten like the skin knew something before the rest of me did. Then I saw her. She was under a vendor tent, but not buying anything. Not talking to staff. She wasn't holding a smoothie or fiddling with jewelry or taking pictures like everyone else. She was standing still facing someone. A man. I could only see the back of his head. Buzzed hair, broad shoulders. I wasn't close enough to hear what they were saying, but I saw her face. And it wasn't her normal face. It wasn't the one she wore around me, not that new mask of exhaustion and politeness she'd been wearing the last couple months, and definitely not the one I married. No. This face, it was softer, sharper, more alive. And then she did this thing. She smiled, tilted her head just a bit, and her lips moved. From where I stood, halfway in the crowd, nearly blocked by the crush of people, I couldn't hear her voice. But I read it. I knew what she mouthed. Sorry, baby. I stood there like someone had shoved their hand straight through my ribs. Not just because she said it, but because of how she said it. Like it was sweet, familiar, practiced. That's not how you speak to a stranger. That's not how you speak to a friend. That's how you speak to someone you shouldn't be speaking to. That's how you speak to someone you belong to. My mouth dried instantly. My legs didn't move. I watched them. Watched her brush something off his sleeve, too casually. Watched him smirk. Watched her look around. Not for me. Just to check if the coast was clear. That's when I stepped back, out of her line of sight, not ready to be seen yet. Not yet. Everything inside me flipped into a low, buzzing silence. Not anger, not pain, not even betrayal. Not yet. Just this eerie, mechanical need to know. To see more. To watch without being watched. She didn't spot me. He left first. Headed toward the side street like it was all rehearsed. She waited another full minute, then walked back out into the crowd like she'd just taken a phone call. When she found me again, she took her drink, kissed me on the cheek. I remember the taste of her lip gloss like it was etched into the back of my throat, and said, "Sorry, I thought I saw someone I knew from high school." She said it like nothing, like air, like it wasn't a lie carefully folded into a harmless anecdote. I smiled back, not because I believed her, but because I needed her to think I did. Because from that second forward, everything changed. I wasn't her husband anymore. I was her shadow. I didn't ask her any questions that night. I played it cool, helped her take off her sandals when we got home, made that stupid lemon ginger tea she likes, sat on the couch with her and acted like my insides weren't pulling apart like Velcro. But something had shifted. There's a difference between suspecting something and knowing, even if all you've got is a whispered sentence and a look you were never meant to see. That sorry baby didn't just crack a window. It tore off the roof. And I couldn't unsee it. I slept next to her, or pretended to. Watched her silhouette rise and fall in the dark, arm over her head like she was completely at peace. And I realized right then, I was sleeping next to someone else's peace. Not mine. Not anymore. The next few days I started looking. Not accusing. Just observing. And once you allow yourself to accept that your partner might be capable of hiding things from you, you start seeing everything differently. She started volunteering at this yoga studio on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Said it helped clear her mind. Fair. Normal. Whatever. But when I checked the studio's website, they didn't list any volunteer programs. I called anonymously and asked. The lady on the phone sounded confused. I didn't tell Jenna what I found. Just waited. Let it cook. Let her keep painting the lie. Every time she left with her purple mat and her green smoothie, I waved goodbye. I watched the door click shut. Then I followed. The second Thursday, I saw her park 5 blocks away from the studio and turn in the opposite direction. She didn't notice me 2 cars back. I turned off the radio. Windows up. AC off. Heart in my throat. She walked into this plain brick building with no signage. I sat there, engine off, every nerve in my body flickering like static. I waited 38 minutes before she came back out, alone, adjusting her jacket like she just fixed herself in a mirror. That night, she brought home food from that Mexican place I love. Played the good wife. Made me laugh once. Told me she missed spending time with me and maybe we should plan a weekend trip. I said, sure. Sounds nice. I wanted to scream. I wanted to flip the table and shatter that sweet little smile with the truth. But not yet. Not while she still thought she was winning. I wasn't after an apology. I wasn't even after the truth anymore. I wanted clarity. I wanted the whole picture, not just a glimpse. Then the break came from where I least expected it, her iPad. She left it on the kitchen counter the next morning while she showered. I was already dressed, coffee in hand. She never locked it. Said she didn't care, had nothing to hide. What a joke that turned out to be. I didn't go through her messages right away. I opened the Notes app. And there it was. A note titled Parking Times. The list was short. Thursdays, 5:15. Tuesdays, 5:10. Same address. Over and over. Why would anyone need to note the exact time they parked unless they were meeting someone who needed to be on schedule? I copied the address. Took screenshots. Then, on impulse, I opened Safari. Last visited tab, how to clear location history on Google Maps. The search was dated 4 days ago. But her history was empty. She came down the stairs humming. Kissed my neck. Asked if I wanted her to grab anything from the store. I looked at her and asked, you like that new yoga teacher? She blinked, then grinned like I'd surprised her with a thoughtful question. Oh, he's great. Super intense though. Pushes us a lot. I'm always sore. That word sore echoed in my brain like a gunshot. I smiled. Told her to enjoy it. She left. The door closed. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't in love anymore. I was in the hunt. I didn't go to work that day. I told my office I had food poisoning. Nobody questioned it. I don't take many sick days. What I really did was sit in my car. Just a street over from the address I pulled from her iPad. Engine off, seat reclined, sunglasses on like a cliché. Except nothing about this felt like a movie. It felt surgical, like I was carving into my own life without anesthesia. The place was weird. Not shady, not clean either. No signs. Just this squat building tucked between an auto shop and some half-dead trees. There were 5 cars in the lot. One of them I recognized, Jenna's silver Subaru. That one burned itself into my vision the second I saw it. I wrote down the plate numbers of the other 4. I sat there for 2 hours. People came and went. 3 men, 2 women. One of the men I remembered from the street festival. The one she mouthed sorry, baby, to. Same buzz cut. Same lazy posture. But here he walked like he belonged. Like he wasn't sneaking around. Like he was the one being visited, not doing the visiting. My fingers were shaking. I took a picture of him as he walked in. Then another one 10 minutes later when he came out to smoke. At 6:03, Jenna stepped outside. Same yoga outfit. Hair tied up. Laughing at something he said. He handed her something, a water bottle? A phone? I couldn't see clearly. She put her hand on his chest for a half second. Then she walked to her car and drove off like it was just another Tuesday. I didn't follow her. I didn't need to. The facts were forming now, and they were uglier than I'd imagined. That night, I asked her if she wanted to go out Friday. Dinner, maybe a movie. She said she was tired, had a long shift that day, but maybe next weekend. I nodded. Said I understood. Kissed her temple. She went to bed early. Said she had a headache. I stayed downstairs. Around midnight, her phone vibrated on the coffee table. She never brought it down. That alone was odd. She must have forgotten. I picked it up and saw a preview of a text, same time Thursday? No name. Just a number. But I'd memorized the last 4 digits from the iPad. The same number that had sent her 4 messages last week. I unlocked her phone with her passcode, which she hadn't changed. Bold move. I didn't open the thread. I didn't want to tip it. I just forwarded the number to my own phone, then deleted the message preview from the lock screen and set the phone back exactly where I found it. The next morning, she was extra affectionate. Made me coffee, sat on my lap while I checked emails like it was 2019 again. I almost forgot myself. Almost let it feel real again. But the phone in my pocket reminded me of what was happening. That same afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in years. I hired a private investigator. I told him I didn't want rumors. I wanted timestamps, video, details, proof. Not for court. Not for revenge. For my own sanity. He asked for 3 days. On the second day, Jenna called me at work just to say she missed me. Said we'd been off lately and she didn't want to lose what we had. That she'd been working through some stuff and hoped I'd be patient with her. It would have been the perfect line, comforting, vague, just the right amount of vulnerability. If I hadn't already known what she was doing between 5:10 and 6 o'clock every Tuesday and Thursday, I probably would have believed her. I probably would have broken down and told her I missed her too. Instead, I asked if she wanted to go away that weekend. Just us. A reset. She hesitated, then said, maybe next weekend? Again. Always next weekend. Always soon. I said sure. That's when I knew the reset wasn't for both of us. It was just for me. She'd already changed channels. The PI called me on Thursday night around 10:45. I was in the garage, fake fixing a busted shelf, just to stay out of the house. His voice was calm, clinical. He said, I've got everything. Photos, videos, timestamps. She wasn't at any yoga studio. She met the same man 4 times in the last 10 days. Same building. Same entry. Same exit. Always around the same hour. I didn't ask if there was physical contact. Didn't need it. I thanked him. He asked if I wanted a flash drive or a Dropbox link. Both, I said. I wanted to see it, but not tonight. Not yet. Not while she was asleep upstairs. That night, I looked at her differently. And for the first time since this started, I didn't feel like I was going to break. I felt ready. I didn't sleep that night. Not even for a second. She lay curled beside me like nothing was wrong, wearing that faded band tee she always slept in. I used to think it was cute, her little ritual. Now it felt like camouflage. Every detail about her had become a lie wrapped in routine. I waited until the morning when the sun made the house feel less like a trap and more like a stage. That's what this was now, a stage, and every actor knew their lines. Except one of us was rewriting the script. She came downstairs yawning, pulling her hoodie sleeves over her hands like she always did when she wanted to be cozy. She smiled at me from the doorway, eyes half shut, voice still scratchy from sleep. You want coffee? She asked. Sit down, I said, calm. Not a request. She blinked, stood frozen for a second, then walked over and sat, cross-legged. Like this was just another Sunday talk about bills or dinner plans. What's going on? She asked. I slid my phone across the table. The screen was paused on a still from the PI's video, her, outside the brick building, arms around the buzzcut guy's neck. His face buried in her shoulder. Her eyes closed. She didn't even flinch. Not denial. Not fear. Just this brief flicker. One breath where her whole body seemed to shrink a centimeter. Then she leaned back. What do you want me to say? She said. That sentence. That sentence is what broke something in me. Not I'm sorry. Not I can explain. Just, what do you want me to say? I want you to tell me how long it's been going on. I said. My voice didn't shake. It should have. But it was stone. She looked down at her hands, picked at a thread on her hoodie. Then, a couple months. His name. Does it matter? I stood up, walked to the sink, stared at the window. I could see the neighbor's dog digging another hole in their yard. Everything outside looked so normal. You could have just left me, I said, turning back. And done what? She shot back suddenly, sharp now like her switch had flipped. Moved back in with my sister? Started over in a one-bedroom apartment eating ramen and crying into a pillow. So instead you lied to my face. Over and over. I needed something, she snapped. I needed to feel like me again. And he made me feel like I wasn't invisible. Like I wasn't just a wife and a houseplant. That last word almost made me laugh. Almost. I walked back to the table, sat across from her. You said sorry, baby, to him. At the festival. You mouthed it to him right in front of me. She looked stunned for the first time. You saw that? I saw everything I needed to. We sat in silence. The kitchen ticked with the sound of the fridge motor starting up. She pulled her knees up on the chair like a kid being scolded. I asked, "Are you in love with him?" She didn't answer. Just shrugged. Not a yes. Not a no. Just this weak, indifferent shrug like my question bored her. Then she said, "I don't know what I feel. I just know I don't feel anything here anymore." That was it. That was the kill shot. Not the cheating. Not the lying. Not the sneaking around. But that sentence, "I don't feel anything here anymore." Like our whole life had been a waiting room she was sick of sitting in. I stood up, went to the bedroom, pulled out a suitcase. Not hers, mine. When I came back downstairs, she hadn't moved. I dropped the suitcase near the door. You don't get to choose how this ends, I told her. Not anymore. She blinked slowly. Still no tears. Not even anger. You're overreacting, she said with this tight little smirk. This kind of thing happens. People drift. That's when I saw her for what she really was. Not just unfaithful. Detached. Hollow. Like all the warmth she used to carry had been drained and replaced with convenience. I didn't drift, I said. You jumped ship and set fire to the lifeboats. And then I left. Didn't slam the door. Didn't look back. I got in my car with my bag and the Dropbox link and the last 7 years sitting in my chest like wet cement. I didn't cry on the way to the motel. I didn't scream. I just drove. Because when someone shows you who they are, truly shows you, the only real answer is silence. The motel smelled like lemon cleaner and regret. One of those places where the curtains never open quite right and the ceiling fan hums like it's chewing through air. I dropped my bag, sat on the edge of the stiff bed, and stared at the wall until the shapes in the wallpaper started moving. I didn't check my phone. I didn't want to see if she'd called or texted. I didn't need more words. Her last ones were still echoing anyway. I just don't feel anything here anymore. She said that to me. Not in a fight. Not in a breakdown. Calm. Flat. Like announcing the weather. Like telling someone the milk's gone bad. But it wasn't just the words. It was how ready she'd been. Like she'd rehearsed this exit in her head a dozen times. Waiting for me to finally figure it out so she could stop pretending. There was no resistance. No denial. No fight to fix it. She didn't care that I found out. She just didn't want to be inconvenienced by it. The Dropbox link from the PI sat unopened in my inbox. I kept hovering over it like opening it would make everything real in a way it wasn't already. But I couldn't look. Not yet. Not while her perfume was still ghosting the inside of my jacket. Instead, I went out. Sat in the parking lot with a fast food burger I didn't eat. Just stared at the street. Watched strangers pass, headlights flicker, neon buzz. All these people going places. Living lives. Making promises. Probably lying too. The thought hit me hard. How long was I the punchline? At what point did she switch roles from my wife to this version of her? Back at the motel, I finally opened the folder. There were 12 photos. 3 videos. A spreadsheet. The PI had labeled everything. Time. Date. Duration. They met for 38 minutes on the dot every Thursday. Tuesday meetings were shorter. All at the same location. Always entered alone. Always exited separately 2 to 3 minutes apart. She even had a routine. She brought a duffel bag, wore the same shoes, changed in the car sometimes. There was a video from outside the brick building. It showed her leaning against the passenger door of his car, smiling like she used to smile at me. He kissed her neck. She didn't flinch. Didn't check her watch. No guilt. No shame. She looked home. That was the first time I cried. Not loud. Not messy. Just sat there, face buried in my hands, ribs locked tight, eyes leaking like my body was trying to drain something poisonous. And maybe it was. What gutted me wasn't that she cheated. It was that she'd already replaced me emotionally, physically, completely, and was still coming home like we were playing house. I started thinking about every moment we shared during those months. The little smiles. Her distracted eyes at dinner. That one night she said, "I'm just tired, babe," and turned away from me in bed. I replayed all of it through this new lens. And I realized I had been living with a counterfeit version of my wife. A well-practiced impersonation. She'd learned the timing, the tone, the gestures. But she'd long stopped feeling anything toward me. She hadn't just lied. She'd become fluent in fiction. I called my brother the next morning. Told him everything. He offered his couch. I declined. I didn't want to be around anyone. I didn't want comfort. I wanted distance from her, from my house, from the version of my life that no longer existed. She finally texted me that afternoon. "You just left. No conversation. No warning." I stared at the screen for a full minute. "You made your choice. I just finally saw it." She didn't reply. Later that night, she sent another one. "I guess we're done then." That one hurt more than it should have. Like she was the one ending it. Like I had walked out unjustified. I didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. But in that moment, something inside me clicked. It wasn't healing. Not yet. It was recognition. This wasn't a marriage anymore. It was a crime scene. And I had finally stopped mistaking the chalk outline for the body. 2 days of silence. Not a word from her. Not a call. No apologies, no tantrums. Just nothing. And that should have told me everything I needed to know, but there was still this corner of my brain, the part that hadn't caught up with the rest, that kept asking, is this really how it ends? Then on the third day, she showed up. No warning. No knock. Just the sound of a car door, footsteps, and then a soft rap on the cheap motel door. I knew it was her before I even looked. There's a certain rhythm to a knock when the person behind it knows they shouldn't be there. I opened the door and there she was standing with her arms crossed, not in tears, not shaken. Just ready for whatever script she had planned. She stepped in like she still had that right. "I figured this is where you'd be," she said, looking around the room with a face full of disgust she didn't bother hiding. I didn't respond. I sat back on the edge of the bed. Let her stand. "I'm not here to fight," she said. I think we both need to talk this out like adults." "You leaving like that was..." "Don't finish that sentence," I cut in. "Calm. Not angry. Just done. Not after what I saw." That stopped her for half a second. But only half. She tilted her head, slipped into the voice I now recognized as her negotiator tone, soft, careful, designed to keep her hands clean. "You're hurt. I get that. I do. But if we're being honest, things haven't been right for a while." There it was. The rewrite. The soft edit of history. Not cheating, just inevitable drift. Not lies, just confusion. A grown-up oops. "I have the videos," I said. That made her blink. "I've seen everything," I added. "Every meeting. Every touch. Every fake excuse. I've got time codes on your betrayal." She swallowed. That was the first honest thing I saw her do in days. Then she said something that snapped the last wire between us. "Okay. Fine. You know. So now what? You want to punish me? You want me to grovel? What are you expecting here?" My laugh came before I meant it to. Not because anything was funny. It was just absurd. That she thought this was about punishment. That she still didn't get it. "I expected you to care," I said. "At least pretend this mattered to you." "I did care," she said sharply. "You think this was easy for me?" I kept trying to figure out if what we had was still worth saving. "You were figuring that out with someone else's hands on you." She opened her mouth. Closed it. Then turned to pace. That was her pattern, retreat into movement when cornered. I used to find it charming. Now it just looked like a malfunction. "Look, I made a mistake," she finally said. "That's not a mistake," I replied. "A mistake is texting the wrong person. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. What you did, that was calculated. It had a schedule. You weren't present anymore." She shot back suddenly, her voice rising. "You stopped seeing me. I was alone in that house for months before anything happened." "No," I said, standing now. "You just went blind to anything that didn't excite you anymore." That hit. I saw it. She bit her lip. Looked away. I gave everything, I said. I bent backward trying to keep us together while you were out there auditioning replacements. Don't rewrite this to make it easier to sleep at night. She sat, slowly, on the chair near the TV. I don't love him, she whispered. I nodded. You don't love me either. She didn't answer that. And that silence, that was my closure. She stayed for a while after that, talking in circles, blaming our routines, her job, her mental health, my lack of enthusiasm, all the usual decoys, but none of it stuck. She could feel it. The thread she used to pull me back in had snapped. I wasn't her audience anymore. When she finally stood to leave, she looked at me differently, not like a lover, not like a partner, not even like an enemy. Just a stranger she used to know too well. At the door, she turned. I guess you're not coming back? No, I said. And if you ever cared about me at all, don't come here again. She didn't argue, just nodded once, quietly, like she was finally starting to realize how far she'd fallen from the version of herself she pretended to be. The door clicked behind her, and the motel was quiet again. But for the first time, it wasn't empty. It was mine. You don't realize how much space someone took up in your life until their presence leaves a shape behind. Not a hole, a negative, a perfect outline of what used to be filled, now just air. Soundless, weightless, but somehow heavier than the real thing. The motel was too quiet. I tried music, TV, podcasts. Nothing helped. Because the noise wasn't outside me. It was under my ribs. I turned the shower on just to hear something. But even the steam carried reminders. She used to fog up the mirror and draw stupid faces in it while brushing her teeth. I never thought I'd miss something that dumb. The worst part wasn't missing her. I missed the life I thought I had. That clean, unbroken version. The fake reality I bought into. And once that illusion dies, everything starts looking suspicious. I started thinking back, obsessively. Not just over the past months, but years. That weekend trip she canceled last minute 3 winters ago. The sudden interest in reconnecting with old friends. The weird, nervous energy after some birthdays. How many lies came before the one that finally cracked the mask? And then came the messages. A week after she walked out of that motel room, she started texting again. First it was, "Can we talk?" I ignored it. 2 days later, "I just want to explain. Really explain. No defenses." I didn't answer that one either, but I stared at it long enough for my battery to die. Then came the longer one. "You're not as innocent in this as you think. I didn't just wake up and decide to hurt you. You checked out long before I ever did anything. You stopped asking how I felt. You stopped seeing me. I was lonely for months. You just didn't notice. I'm not saying what I did was okay. I'm just saying you weren't some perfect husband living with a monster." That message hit differently. Not because I agreed, but because I recognized the strategy. It wasn't apology. It was equalization. She didn't want forgiveness. She wanted to drag me into the mud with her, to smear the lines, to make this a gray area where both of us were broken and confused and hurting. Not a clear betrayal with a cause and a consequence. But the truth was cleaner than that. I had flaws. Of course I did. But I stayed. I tried. I was present. And she chose to betray. You don't accidentally meet someone every Tuesday and Thursday behind a fake address. You don't drift into secrecy. That takes steps. That takes planning. That takes removal. I didn't respond. I deleted the message and blocked the number. Again. But the damage lingered. I found myself checking the mirror differently, questioning my memories, wondering if maybe I really had become invisible if I'd made it too easy for her to vanish. I knew it wasn't rational, but betrayal doesn't just steal trust, it mutates self-worth. I wasn't healing. I was dismantling, trying to separate the real from the fake inside my own head. I went back to the house once. She wasn't there, I made sure of that. I needed to grab some things. Winter coats, documents, a couple of keepsakes I couldn't replace. The place looked the same but smelled different. Cleaner but colder. Like she'd scrubbed my scent out of the air. There was a new candle on the kitchen counter, some herbal blend that meant nothing to me. The The photos on the wall were still there, but I noticed she'd moved a few around. One was missing. A framed picture of us in Chicago 3 years ago. Gone. She had started editing the past. That's when I realized she wasn't just moving on, she was rewriting the entire narrative. And I couldn't stop her. I'd only get to keep the version of the story that lived in my own head. And the rest would decay in hers. Mutate. Fade. I walked out of that house without saying goodbye to anything. That night in the motel, I opened a blank document on my laptop. Just sat there. Staring. Waiting for the words to come. Not poetry. Not therapy. Not some dramatic manifesto. Just truth. For me. I wrote, from the shadows of the crowd, I caught her lips mouthing, "Sorry, baby." That was the moment everything fell apart. I didn't need an explanation, just proof. And when I got it, the silence spoke louder than words. Then I saved it. Closed the laptop. And for the first time in weeks, I slept. I hadn't seen her face in 26 days. Not in person. Not in photos. Not even in memory, if I could help it. I trained myself to look past her. Even in my own mind. She became this fogged-out silhouette, recognizable only by absence. I was doing better. Not good. Not healthy. But better. Sleeping more than I wasn't. Eating food that didn't come in wrappers. I'd moved into a friend's empty condo downtown. No furniture except a bed, a desk, and one heavy chair. I dragged up 4 flights of stairs by myself. It was bare and echoey and mine. Then I ran into her. Of course I did. It was a Saturday. Late morning. I just grabbed coffee and a cheap haircut. I was walking past this farmer's market on 6th. One I used to hate but tolerated because she loved it. The scent of lavender soap and grilled peaches still carried her fingerprints. And there she was, by the tomatoes, wearing that same smug indifference she wore during our last conversation. Hair shorter now, sunglasses perched on her head, laughing at something the vendor said. No buzz-cut guy in sight, but I didn't need him there to feel it. It was like watching a stranger walk around in my old clothes. She hadn't seen me. I could have kept walking. I should have. But my feet stopped like they belonged to someone else. Because deep down, some part of me still wanted answers that don't exist. Some chemical in my blood still thought confrontation could clean the wound. She turned. Saw me. Froze. We stared. For seconds. Maybe 5. She walked toward me. I didn't move. She didn't smile. I figured I'd run into you eventually, she said. Yeah, I replied. Guess the city's not big enough for both our ghosts. She exhaled through her nose, something between a laugh and a sigh. Her eyes scanned my face like she was searching for something she recognized. You look different, she said. Colder. I wanted to say, no, just clearer. But I kept that one to myself. I've been meaning to text you, she added casually. Too casually. No, you haven't, I said. You've been meaning to feel better about yourself. That's not the same thing. That landed. Her lips pressed together. Jaw clenched. I wasn't trying to hurt you, she said. I smiled. That dead, humorless smile I developed in the mirror. And yet, I said, you rehearsed every lie like you were aiming for precision. I already told you how lonely I was, she said, sharper now. And you fixed that with secrets and Tuesday nights? I snapped back, voice flat. You didn't want love. You wanted permission to be selfish. Her eyes went glassy, not from emotion, from defense, from realizing that I wasn't here to crack open and beg for closure, that I'd already sealed that part off. You're not blameless, she said. I never claimed to be. I just didn't lie with a calendar. She looked like she might say more. But then her phone buzzed. She glanced down. Whatever name was on the screen made her look away. I asked, is that him? Silence. I don't need to know, I said. Just wanted to see your face when I asked. She tucked the phone back into her coat. I hope you find peace, Tyler. You don't hope that, I said. You just don't want me to be the version of you I met in that motel, the version that saw you. She looked at me like I'd said something cruel. Maybe I had. But cruelty isn't measured in tone. It's measured in clarity. She turned to leave. Didn't look back. Same walk. Same perfume trailing in the air like a line of apology written in smoke. I stood there, holding a half-warm coffee, wondering why people who destroy things always get to walk away looking untouched. But this time I didn't follow. This time I didn't even flinch. I turned and walked the other way, and for once the silence felt earned. It came in a plain white envelope. No return address. Just my name in handwriting that used to write birthday cards and grocery lists. That stupid curly R in Tyler that she always exaggerated, like it was her little signature. I held it for a minute before opening it, just staring at the paper like it might combust if I waited long enough. I was standing in the kitchen of the condo, barefoot on cold tile, still chewing the last bite of toast when I sliced the flap open. The letter wasn't long, but it was loaded. Tyler, I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I get that. I've earned the silence. But I need to say this, not because I want you back, and not because I think it'll fix anything. Just because I've been carrying something I can't keep carrying anymore. I wasn't planning on hurting you. I wasn't trying to build a second life behind your back. It started like most mistakes do, with a moment. A small one. That turned into a door I shouldn't have opened. But I did. And I didn't close it fast enough. I lied to you. I became someone I never thought I would. I'm not proud of it. And I hate that I dragged you through that version of me. I think a part of me was waiting for you to call me out. Waiting for you to see the cracks. Maybe I was too much of a coward to do it myself. Maybe I hoped if you saw it you would walk away first so I wouldn't have to be the villain. But I was. I am. The truth is, I didn't stop loving you because of him. I stopped loving myself, and I didn't know how to tell you that without losing everything. So instead, I broke everything. I'm sorry. Not the kind of sorry that expects forgiveness. The kind that knows it's not coming and still needs to be said. You didn't deserve the way I handled things. You deserved someone who would fight for you, not someone who studied how to disappear. I hope the next person sees you fully. And I hope you let them. She didn't sign her full name. Just that one letter. Like it was some delicate parting breath instead of a wrecking ball written in cursive. I read it twice. Once with my eyes. Once with my memory. And I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I didn't even feel relief. Because it was a good letter. That's what made it worse. She said all the right things. Owned the betrayal. Took the fall. But even as I read it, I could feel it. She still had control of the narrative. Even in apology, she was curating her redemption. A confession isn't always for the victim. Sometimes it's just the villain closing their own loop. I folded the letter. Didn't tear it. Didn't burn it. Just tucked it back into the envelope and slid it between two books on the shelf. Not to remember, not to forget. Just to store it somewhere that wasn't inside me anymore. Later that night, I went for a walk. No destination. No playlist. Just the sound of shoes on concrete and a sky that couldn't decide if it wanted to storm or not. I thought about all the things that would never be said. The versions of this story that would live in separate timelines now. Hers. Mine. The one I'll carry in my chest when someone else asks, "So what happened with your last relationship?" I'll never read that letter again. But I'll never need to. Because once someone teaches you how deeply they can cut you while still smiling, you stop keeping their words close. You just keep the scar. Healing isn't some clean, cinematic sequence. There's no montage, no background piano. It's just you alone doing unremarkable things and suddenly noticing that they don't hurt anymore. I didn't wake up one day and feel better. I just realized, slowly, that she wasn't the first thing in my head anymore when I opened my eyes. That I didn't replay her last words in the silence before sleep. That the air wasn't thick with what-ifs. I kept the condo. Got a real couch. Bought plants. They're still alive. Somehow. I work late again, not to avoid pain, just because I like what I do. I see friends. I go places. I eat better. I sleep. Not always, but enough. There's someone new. We're not serious. We don't talk about the past. She doesn't ask why I flinch when I hear a lie that's too soft, too clean. She laughs with her whole body. I notice that. It's not Jenna's kind of laugh, rehearsed, camera ready. This one's crooked, messy. Real. But this isn't a rebound. It's not a fix. It's just a presence. And that's enough for now. Some nights, though, when the world gets too quiet, I still think about the version of me that lived in that marriage. That man who thought love meant endurance. Who thought loyalty meant swallowing discomfort until it stopped choking. He wasn't weak. He just didn't know what betrayal looked like with perfume on. Now he does. Now I do. I never responded to the letter. Never texted. Never gave her the performance she probably half hoped for, the closure scene where I either forgive her or collapse at her feet. Because here's the thing they don't tell you about betrayal, it teaches you the weight of your own voice. And when you finally find it again, after all the lies have cleared, you don't raise it to scream. You raise it to choose yourself. She doesn't get a legacy in my story. She gets a footnote. A line break. The moment everything fell apart so I could rebuild from the ashes with my name first on the blueprint. So here I am. Not broken. Not healed. Just real again. And if someone reading this needs a line to carry with them, take this one. Trust isn't given. It's earned. And once it's buried, no apology can dig it up whole. That's the story. Not because I needed to tell it, but because someone out there needs to recognize there's inside it. And when they do, they'll know the silence doesn't mean weakness. It means you finally walked away from the fire without looking back to see if they were watching. Tyler.